Hello everyone and welcome back to another Planet Zoo 2 speculation video where we're going to be discussing the Terrarium and Aquarium exhibit species. So I have the idea that the aquariums would also have exhibits, and also that the exhibit system in general would be overhauled in Planet Zoo 2 because it certainly needs a change. And I'll be going over some of the details of what my ideas are for how it could be improved in a separate video, but today we're going to be going over a few of the species I think should be added to the roster to really diversify the kinds of animals you can have in the exhibits. Now I've sort of split it up into snakes, lizards, turtles, amphibians, invertebrates and marine species, and so just so that you've got an idea of the order. And yeah, let's get into it. So our first species is the northern king cobra. So for those who don't know, the king cobra was recently divided up into 4 different species, all being part of the Ophiophagus genus. The northern king cobra is found in southern Asia, from India to places like Thailand and Malaysia. It is the largest and longest venomous snake on the planet, getting up to 6 meters long, particularly the males. And yeah, they're not true cobras. So true cobras are in the genus of Naja, and they are generally prey for king cobras, as their primary diet is made up of other snakes. But they're very common in zoos, as they are just a magnificent snake. I've seen them in person and they certainly do not disappoint, and yeah, they are certainly an animal that I really want to see in Planet Zoo 2. Another one of my favourite snakes is the gaboon viper. So this is the largest viper in Africa, the heaviest viper in the world, and has just the most striking pattern where it blends in with leaf litter. So its scales are coloured in different shades of brown, yellows and whites to blend in with all sorts of different coloured leaves on the forest floor. And they also have the record for the longest fangs of any venomous snake. But they're also fairly widespread in captivity, being in several reptile institutions. But yeah, they are just an impressive animal that I think would make a fantastic addition to the African roster. The Central American eyelash pit viper is in a similar situation to the king cobra, where the eyelash viper was divided up into multiple different species, with the Central American being probably the best known due to its golden scales. So these snakes are well known for hiding around yellow flowers to camouflage and surprise hummingbirds, of which they can catch on the wing. But they're very beautiful snakes and really stand out in a reptile house, and also have a multitude of different colour variations, as the Central American species doesn't just come in this golden colour. It can also come in greens with brown mottling, reds and all sorts of other colours. Another iconic snake is the black mamba, one of the most feared snakes in Africa and possibly one of the fastest snakes on the planet, being able to catch up to a human running. So yeah, they're very well known for actually running down their prey, which is not humans. Humans can just often irritate the snake, and the snake doesn't want to hurt you. Like, snakes aren't out to get you. They're more afraid of you than you are of them, because as a human, you are much bigger than any snake. And so any snake would see you as a threat. And black mambas in particular live in a very hard environment where there's lions, honey badgers, leopards, and eagles, all sorts of these different predators that the black mamba has to compete with. But it gets its name from the black interior of its mouth, which makes it quite an intimidating sight. But they're very cool, very widespread in snake institutions, so several reptile houses I know of have them. And yeah, they're a very iconic snake, and certainly one of the most iconic on the planet. Moving on to a bigger snake, we have the reticulated python. So the game currently lacks large snakes, yellow anaconda being probably the largest we have. But the reticulated python is the longest snake on the planet, getting up to 9 meters in length, and is found across southern and southeast Asia, and is able to be so widespread due to its adaptability, as this snake is not just so good on the ground, it's also great in the trees, but also a fantastic swimmer, and so has been able to crisscross through several islands in Indonesia, and has even showed up very close to where Oceania's border is. And so, who knows, maybe one day a reticulated python may make its way to Australia. It would be very interesting, but they are very cool animals, well known for the reticulated pattern, which is sort of a netted pattern. And yeah, they have a great luster to the skin, which kind of looks like they've been dipped in oil, as they really have quite a nice shine to them. Emerald tree boas are another very common snake in captivity, widespread in many American institutions, and is certainly up there as one of the most requested snakes. And they are certainly beautiful, with that iridescent emerald coloration broken up by a couple of white spots. They're very cool, widespread across South America. And yeah, I mean, I'm not as familiar with this snake species as many others are. There's a snake here in Australia that I'm much more familiar with, and it's called the green tree python. And despite them being different, they are very similar in their overall appearance. Although the emerald tree boa is bigger than the green tree python. But yeah, just a little fact there. But emerald tree boas would certainly be a striking addition, and probably hard to find depending on how lush you make your exhibits. Ball pythons are a python species from Africa, and particularly the Congo rainforest. They're also quite common as pets, as they're fairly docile and come in a whole range of variations in the pet trade. But I really like them because of their coloration, their pattern. It's a really nice coloration. But yeah, you can have all sorts of variations in this snake, and certainly a lot of the snakes I've mentioned here would certainly go well in a Congo themed area, as of all the regions in Africa, the Congo lacks the most animals, I'd say, in that, like, there's plenty of awesome species from the Congo that just haven't been added yet. And ball pythons, gaboon vipers, they're just two of those. And yeah, I think it would just be really nice to have a snake like this. Now onto the southern green anaconda. Now there are two species of green anaconda, with the main species being divided up into the northern and southern. So southern green anacondas are more so from Brazil, Bolivia and Peru, whereas northern green anacondas are generally from countries like Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, all those northern South American countries. But they are one of the heaviest snakes on the planet. With I think the northern is bigger, but southerns are still very impressive and are the most common in captivity. But they're of course well known for their semi-aquatic nature, being a snake that spends an awful lot of time in water, and would probably have grown to this massive size due to its aquatic nature, and hunts all sorts of animals. They are known to constrict caiman, crocodiles, capybaras, deer. I don't know if they'll take tapirs, but they're certainly an impressive predator. Now onto a snake that many people are quite familiar with, as like the ball python, it is fairly common in the pet trade. So this is I think it's pronounced the Pueblan milk snake. Forgive me if I've gotten that wrong. But they are one of 24 recognized subspecies of milk snake, and most commonly displayed in captivity. So they are a non-venomous colubrid and sport multiple color variations. Now, colubrids are largely a non-venomous group of snakes, though there are some notable members that are quite venomous, like the boomslang from Africa. But I think it's a good idea for like the snake roster to be divided up into like your four major categories. So you have colubrids, you have vipers, you have elapids, and then you have the constrictors, so pythons and boas. And I think that's a really nice way of varying out the snake roster, as there are so many different kinds of snake, and colubrids make up a majority of the snake species on the planet, as many snakes on several continents are colubrids, though here in Australia we are primarily elapids and pythons. Now moving on to not a lizard, but close to a lizard. So this is the tuatara, specifically the northern tuatara from the North Island of New Zealand, and they are a very ancient reptile, with their group being traced all the way back to the Middle Triassic period. So they're ancient, and the Tuatara in general is the only member of of the group that remains, as they used to be quite widespread, found on multiple continents during the Mesozoic era. But yeah, they are now only confined to New Zealand now. But they're very cool reptiles. Not massive. Like, they're about the same size as most regular lizards. Well, I say regular lizards, about the same size as something like a bearded dragon, which we'll get to later. But they're not lizards, so they are squamates. So squamates includes lizards, snakes, rhynchocephalians like the tuatara, and mosasaurs, which are an extinct group of marine reptiles. So the tuatara is closely related to lizards, and through convergent evolution has evolved pretty similar looking to them. And yeah, but is somewhat more specialized, as these guys are actually voracious predators, hunting many different kinds of animals like birds, smaller reptiles, amphibians, insects, particularly stuff like the weta, which is a large bush cricket from New Zealand. But they are very cool reptiles, not very common in captivity. It's sort of a privilege if you're a zoo and you're able to display a tuatara, but they're very cool reptiles, certainly an ancient looking animal. Northern caiman lizards are fairly similar to the tegu, which is a group of lizards that has convergently evolved to be very similar to monitor lizards. So they have evolved a forked tongue for better sensing their environment and tracking down prey, and the caiman lizard is very similar in that regard. However, unlike the tegu, this guy is actually a fantastic swimmer, so they are largely semi-aquatic, being found around rivers and streams, and are pretty adept divers too, being able to dive under the water and look for food. And yeah, they're also very brightly coloured, as you can see. So the northern caiman lizard males in particular can develop some really bright coloration, notably that red coloration around the head. But they're very cool little lizards. They're called caiman lizards due to the osteoderms that cover their skin, and also their semi-aquatic nature, which, being found in South America, is very similar to the notorious caimans. Plumed basilisks are one of my favourite lizards, as they are, one, very stunning to look at, like those bright blue spots that dot around the body, and also those raised fins. They're very prehistoric looking. But the most notable thing about the basilisk lizard is that it has the ability to run across water. So that has given them the nickname the Jesus Christ lizard. But they are able to do this as they are very light, so they're fairly small lizards, but they also have large back feet that have special fringes on the toes that help to spread its weight and flick away water as it runs. And yeah, they're very cool little lizards. I don't know if we'd be able to get the water running behavior in Planet Zoo, but it would certainly be amazing if that could just be like a little looped animation. Or I'll discuss what I think the exhibit system will be in the video that I'm currently working on. The panther chameleon is easily one of the most requested lizards in the game. Chameleons in general are a fascinating group of lizards, as primarily found in Africa. But they are certainly a beautiful group of lizards with so many different species, so many different colours, with the panther chameleon probably being the most vivid, as they come not just in this greeny, yellow and red colour, but can have a really prominent red coloration with a mix of greens and blues. But yeah, they would be just a fantastic lizard to have, such a striking animal, and would add to the Madagascar diversity. New Caledonian giant geckos are the largest geckos in the world, and one I've actually met myself. They are very cool lizards. Geckos in general are very cool, but I picked this over something like the tokay gecko simply because I think it looks more interesting. Like, the tokay gecko is a very cool animal, don't get me wrong. Bright blue, orange polka dots, behaves just like any other gecko, though it has a very nasty bite, I've heard. But New Caledonian geckos also have a pretty powerful bite, but I like them more just because of their camouflaged coloration. So they camouflage to look like the mossy, lichen-covered trees that they live in, and can make them pretty hard to find, especially if you make the right exhibit for them. But yeah, they're beautiful animals and only found on the islands of New Caledonia, so they'd have that exclusivity for them, whereas tokay geckos are found all across Southeast Asia. But they're very beautiful. Like, I love seeing these guys every time I get the opportunity, and I think they'll just make a standout addition in the exhibits just because of their incredible camouflage and that they are a gecko. The frilled lizard, or frill-necked lizard, is easily Australia's most iconic reptile, other than the saltwater crocodile. But they are a absolutely phenomenal lizard, very well known for that frill that they extend when threatened. So they'll open their mouth and that frill expands at the same time. And yeah, gives them a really intimidating presence. Now, some people think they're venomous, but they are not venomous. They are not the Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park. But they are certainly territorial. But they're not really going to attack you. They're just going to try and scare you off. Like, you see videos of people that encounter these lizards and they'll like run up to them on their hind legs. That is something really cool that they do. And then climb up on them. They're really just trying to assert their dominance. They're not trying to bite you. They're not going to hurt you unless you hurt them. Like, they're really just showing off, because that is their biggest defense, is showing off to a predator, because many of their predators are much bigger than themselves, like eagles and dingoes and pythons and goannas, all sorts of animals that the frilled lizard has to scare off. And humans are just one of those animals as well, as humans have existed in Australia for 60,000 years or more. But yeah, they are incredible lizards, very popular in reptile houses, and easily the most iconic reptile we could have in our exhibits. Another very popular Australian lizard is the central bearded dragon, a very popular pet, and notably so as they are quite friendly. But they're very cool lizards, bearded dragons in general, so there are multiple species. But the central bearded dragon is probably my favourite, just because of the different colorations it can come in. Now that is of course through selective breeding in captivity, but in the wild even they can come in a whole range of colours. From this blonde colour they can also turn quite bright orange, a deep brown, almost black coloration, and all sorts of different other shades. But they're very cool. They live in the deserts, of course, as Central Australia is quite arid, but they're very well adapted to doing so, as lizards don't have to drink as much water as most other animals. They can conserve their energy quite a lot, and the bearded dragon, like the frillneck, as they are also related, puts on an impressive display, as they get their name from that beard of raised scales on the underside of their lower jaw, which they will actually expand and extend to form a large beard of scales that makes them appear larger. They also expand their ribs, like many other types of lizards, to make themselves appear larger and more intimidating. And I've actually witnessed this myself. There was a bearded dragon on a fence post that I encountered, and it did that. It pivoted itself on its side, expanded its ribs, expanded the beard, opened its mouth, really gave off a nice display of how it defends itself. But they're really cool lizards, very ancient looking, and certainly one that I'd love to see added into the exhibits. Now, I'm a sucker for the colour blue. My favourite colour is blue. We really don't have a lot of blue animals in Planet Zoo, but easily one of my favourite lizards is the Grand Cayman blue iguana, a species that was almost extinct in the wild at a time, but has since been making a pretty nice recovery in the Grand Cayman Islands. But they of course get their name from the males sporting this blue coloration. So it gets even more intensely blue into the breeding season, when they can really turn like a nice ocean blue, or even sky blue, like many shades of blue. But they're very impressive lizards. They're the biggest of all the iguanas, and yeah, fairly common in particularly American zoos, but even still, they are an amazing animal and would certainly add a nice dash of colour to the lizard roster. Speaking of dashes of colour, the emerald tree monitor is certainly a beautiful species of monitor lizard, and they get their name of course from their emerald coloration. So they're found on a couple of islands in Oceania, but they're much smaller than most monitor lizards, so smaller than the current Nile, Asian water, and Komodo dragons. But they are small enough that they'd probably be able to fit in an exhibit. But they do come in a few different colorations, so primarily this emerald color, but they can also come in blue. And so you can really end up with some nice variation in the coloration. Moving on to turtles, we have the alligator snapping turtle, one of the most impressive turtles on the planet due to that immense head and those powerful jaws. So they can shut they shut them like a steel trap. Like something comes close, they have a little structure on their tongue which they wiggle around like a little worm. And I've seen this too. Like it was a juvenile alligator snapping turtle in a terrarium at a reptile park, and it had its jaws open, sitting at the bottom of the tank, and just wiggling it around to try and attract a little fish. And that is what they do in the wild. So they will sit there, jaws agape, wiggle that around, fish comes in, comes too close, and snap. Now, unlike most turtles, their head is way too large for them to retract it into their shell. But even so, with jaws like that, they don't really need to, as their head is well defended. Like, it's pretty well armored too, but it's also probably the last place that any animal in its natural environment would want to mess with the alligator snapper, just because, well, they could lose something very easily. Like, the alligator snapper has been known to break bones in a human arm, even probably just bite the arm in half, depending on the turtle. Like, these guys can get very large, and the larger the turtle, the stronger the bite force, and so yeah, you don't want to mess with these guys. But they're very impressive. They don't move too much, as they're not really an active predator, so they're a sit and wait ambush predator. So they will sit down at the bottom of a pond and just wait for prey to come to them, as they're fairly well camouflaged, and over time they get more and more moss and algae growing on them, and really just adds to their camouflage. But even despite this, they are just such an impressive looking animal that it'd be a crime not to include them in Planet Zoo. Pig-nosed turtles are easily one of the cutest turtles due to their adorable little pig-like nose. But these guys are found in Australia, in particularly the Mary River, and a few other rivers up in the Northern Territory. But they're very cool little guys, so probably the most like a sea turtle of all the freshwater turtles, as their feet have evolved into paddles. But they have a really nice smooth shell as well, so it's not very rough, and that just adds to some good streamlining in rivers, especially rivers that are patrolled by crocodiles and bull sharks. You really want to be able to move fast. But these guys are endangered, unfortunately, due to predation by invasive predators, pollution, and yeah, just all sorts of different threats to them. But plenty of people are out there trying to protect them, and they are very popular in captivity, so you will more than likely have seen one of these before if you ever went to a reptile house. Like, I know they're particularly popular in US institutions. There are a few here in Australia, so there's one reptile park I know of. There was another at a zoo that I went to recently, but otherwise they're still very cool reptiles and would certainly love to see them. Another strange reptile is this smiley little chap, the mata mata, or mata mata, which is a freshwater turtle from South America. So they're easily one of the weirdest looking turtles, with that long, thick neck that is designed to resemble leaves at the bottom of the river, and even their shell is coloured to resemble that too. So they're very well camouflaged, much like the alligator snapper. But unlike the alligator snapper, they can be an active predator if necessary. Although alligator snappers could as well, just not very fast. But these guys, they're much smaller than alligator snapping turtles, and yeah, they will sit and wait. They're very weird, obviously, because that little trunk that acts like a snorkel in shallow water, but that big mouth can expand and engulf prey that can be like a fish, a frog, smaller turtles, lizards, all sorts of animals that they find in the rivers. But yeah, very cool, very odd, and would make a very diverse addition to the roster. Now on to amphibians. We have the Chinese giant salamander, the largest amphibian on the planet today. Now it is dwarfed by many prehistoric amphibians, but this is the largest we have today. It is unfortunately critically endangered due to damming and pollution of the river systems where it lives, but they're quite prevalent in zoos. They're trying to establish breeding programs to protect them and create an insurance population so that if the worst were to happen in the wild, that they are still around to potentially engage in reintroduction programs. But they're very large, get up to 2 meters or even 3 meters in length. They're very impressive amphibians. Yeah, very interesting animals. Like they, much like the mata and alligator snapper, they're not that active, so you'll generally see them just waiting in the water. Though at night they are particularly active predators, but generally they will just be resting and just chilling out. Now, poison dart frogs come in a whole range of colours and various toxicities. But one thing that you may not know about poison dart frogs is how they get their poison. So, poison dart frogs particularly feed on ants and all sorts of small insects. Those small insects have a toxin in them, and as amphibians absorb substances very easily, they have absorbed the toxins from these insects that they feed on and have actually used it as their own defense. So that is absorbed into their skin and acts as their own protection. And so poison dart frogs have evolved to feed on these specific insects and develop their poison. Now they can feed on other insects, but then they don't get the poison and can actually be just completely harmless if you don't feed them the insects that give them their toxicity. And that's how you can actually have like walk-through poison dart frog exhibits in some parts of the world. In some zoos, can't remember if it was the Nashville Zoo. They had like an atrium where you could walk in and there's like golden poison dart frogs just hopping around. But they of course haven't been fed the insects that give them their poison, and the golden poison dart frog has the highest toxicity of all of them, which we do currently have in the game. But yeah, if you don't feed them the special ants, they're not poisonous. Now they also come in a whole range of colours. So one of my favourites is the dying poison dart frog, which it comes in a range of variations. Most famously, they come in a full cobalt blue in in a particular subspecies, and I think that's something that should really be implemented in the game. As I said, blue is lacking in the roster. But they also come with this black top with the yellow stripes. That would be really nice as well. Sort of looking like they have just had a mix of paint dropped on them. But yeah, they're very cool little amphibians, and yeah, would add to the diverse range of colours that poison dart frogs can come in. We've got yellow, we've got red, now we need blue. Another frog that is quite popular in captivity is the mission golden-eyed tree frog. So these guys are also known as the Amazon milk frog, but they're also poisonous, as their bright colours are also a warning to predators. But they get their name from those golden irises, and yeah, they're very cute, sort of a classic looking frog, but yeah, very popular in captivity and yeah, have a really nice pattern. The Lake Titicaca water frog is very common in captivity, as it is an endangered species. So they live in Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, which is one of the highest lakes in the world, as it is at a higher elevation than most other lakes, being way high up in the Andes. But yeah, these frogs live in that lake, and I think were discovered by Jacques Cousteau back when he discovered Lake Titicaca. But yeah, they're very cool, very interesting looking frogs. I don't know as much about them as some other people might, but they're very common and very interesting looking frogs, and also would add to that conservation aspect that Planet Zoo has tried to establish over the years. The Argentine horned frog is probably one of the most recognizable frogs in the world, as they're very common in the pet trade, as they come in a whole range of different colorations. But they do resemble a mix of mosses and lichens in their natural habitat, and that's how they get this interesting mix of different colors. Now, they're called horned frogs, as when the males are mature, they have large horns that are on their brows that they use for fighting one another. But they're very impressive, one of the larger frogs that you'll find in South America, and certainly one that has an interesting pattern. Moving on to exhibit mammals, which is only something we have in the walkthrough exhibits, but it's certainly something that I'd like to see in the next Planet Zoo game. And that's like several different kinds of exhibit mammals that are housed in exhibits all on their own, like not walkthrough, and can just be displayed on their own. Naked mole rats in particular could have a fairly unique exhibit style, as they are an animal that lives in colonies, much like ants and termites. And so you could set up a special exhibit where you've got a topsoil, but then you go into the subsoil and there's just all these different tunnels and chambers that the naked mole rats can run around through. And you could even create some really interesting exhibit types with them just going along a whole wall, or even having tunnels that go under the guest path and just see them moving around as they do their thing. Like, that would be really fun. And these guys are certainly iconic because of them being completely naked of fur, and also having a face that only a mother could love, but they're still fairly cute. But yeah, very common in captivity as well, so you'll see them in many different nocturnal houses in particular, as they of course live underground and don't have the best eyesight, and so keeping them in a nocturnal house would be the best idea. Another animal perfect for the dark is the common vampire bat. So they of course get this name for one reason and one reason only. It is because they feed exclusively on blood. So they have some of the sharpest teeth on the planet, where they will make an incision in their prey animal, the blood will flow, and they actually have an anticoagulant in their bite, in their saliva. And so that is administered into the animal, and the blood just keeps flowing. It prevents blood clots. And so you could say the common vampire bat is both enjoying a blood meal but also keeping its host healthy. But they're very small, only about the weight of a chip packet. But yeah, very common. One of the more common bat species displayed in zoos, just because of how iconic it is, and would certainly be an interesting animal to have in Planet Zoo. And I feel like would have been a better choice than the Egyptian fruit bat in the Twilight Pack, as how much more Halloween themed can you get than the vampire bat? The black and rufous sengi, previously known as elephant shrews, are related to elephants and hyraxes, but are much smaller and live in the undergrowth and come in a whole range of different forms, with the black and rufous probably being the most distinct due to that red head and that black backside. But the color contrast is really nice there. But they're very cute, small little animals, and would certainly be a very diverse pick for the mammal roster, as we don't really have any other animals that are related to elephants other than the aardvark. And yeah, it's very interesting to look at how many different animals are actually related to elephants. And so the sengi would certainly be a great addition. Moving on to invertebrates, we have the hairy-headed leafcutter ant. So much like the naked mole rat, this species could be housed in a very unique exhibit type, where you have topsoil, subsoil, several different tunnels and chambers where the ants are moving around. But also, I think the San Diego Zoo gives them access to a whole tree where they grab the leaves and take them back into their colony, and you can just see them behaving as they normally do. Very interesting ants, and of course they get their name from the hairier heads on the soldier ants, which are those much larger, meaner ants. And then the much smaller worker ants, which most people would be familiar with as the general ants that you encounter. But yeah, very cool, icon of the Amazon, and would certainly make a fantastic addition to diversify the insect roster. Another very cool insect is the praying mantis. So there are many different species of mantis around the world. I was going to initially go for like the Chinese giant mantis, which most people would be familiar with as Seth Rogen's character in Kung Fu Panda. But I thought I'd go for a more exquisite choice, and that is the orchid mantis. So these beautiful insects are found in Southeast Asia that camouflage to resemble orchids. So coming in a whole range of different shades, particularly pinks, whites, and any colours that resemble the local orchids. But yeah, very beautiful little insects. They're not very large, of course, so spotting them would be very difficult in the exhibit, but they're not microscopic. But they're very beautiful, would really be an eye-catching addition to the exhibits. The coconut crab is the largest of the hermit crabs and is of course so large that it doesn't need a shell to protect itself. Now these guys are found on multiple islands in the Pacific Ocean and on many other islands too, but these guys are very cool as they are huge and their claws are actually strong enough to crack a coconut, as on the islands that they live on, coconuts are one of the only bits of food that you can get. But these guys are also scavengers, so anything that washes up from the ocean, these guys will feed on it, and have been part of like the Amelia Earhart mystery every now and then, as these guys are scavengers, but I don't know if they would have really been part of it. But yeah, they're very cool animals, not too common in captivity as they are fairly difficult to keep, but I know a few places that do have them, San Diego Zoo being one of them. But yeah, I know a lot of people would really like to see this species added into the game, as it is a very colourful and iconic animal. Another rarity in captivity is the yellow-lipped sea crate. So these are of course a sea snake that live in the Indo-Pacific and are well known for that whiter head that can actually take a yellow shade. But these guys are quite highly venomous, but are not very dangerous to people, as most snakes aren't dangerous to people unless it's an accident. But these guys in particular are quite docile, so they're not going to bite you because, well, as long as you don't harm them, they don't have a reason to. But also they're a fish eater. They eat fish, so they're not really going to be looking at a warm-blooded meal, as most fish are cold-blooded anyway. So they're mostly just detecting movements. But these guys are really cool, as they do have that black and white pattern that runs down their bodies. And I did say they are rare because most are rescues, but a good few institutions do keep them. Auckland Zoo in New Zealand recently acquired one, as it was found on the seashore, very far away from home, and so can't just be released back into the ocean because it is so far away from where it is naturally found. So it would not survive just being released back into the ocean like that. But they're very cool. Easily one of the most iconic of the marine reptiles that we have around today, and yeah, would certainly diversify the snake roster. A very interesting fish species, so now we're getting into more marine stuff. We have the Atlantic mud skipper. So mud skippers are very well known for, of course, skipping across mud. So these guys spend a lot of time out of water and can breathe air. So you'll generally see these guys in mangroves around the world. So mud skippers are found worldwide, in particularly equatorial regions, but these guys are found in, I think, Central America and maybe Africa. I'm not 100% sure, but probably the Americas. But these guys are very cool. They're one of the only mud skippers kept in captivity, as not a lot of them are. But yeah, it would be a really interesting addition to create a mangrove exhibit with these guys just hopping about. Japanese spider crabs are one of the largest crabs on the planet, with certainly one of the widest leg spans, as these guys can get absolutely massive. But they're found quite deep in the ocean, off Japan, and in fairly cold waters as well. So aquariums that do keep them have to keep them in very cold water, but also water that is at a very similar pressure to what the Japanese spider crab requires. But they're very cool. quite an iconic animal, really stand out with their pattern. Another icon of the Pacific Ocean is the giant Pacific octopus, the largest of all the octopi, and easily the most impressive. So these guys can actually get an arm span of about 8 meters across, so very big. But they have easily the most distinct coloration with that nice crimson red coloration that many do sport. But they're very intelligent animals, as cephalopods in general are some of the most intelligent marine animals on the planet. Being able to solve problems and even create new strategies for defending themselves. But these guys are the largest and are only found on the Pacific coast of North America, but are very cool and fairly common in captivity as well. The weedy sea dragon is a species that I'm particularly familiar with, as they are found in the Southern Ocean off of Australia, and a little bit of the Tasman Sea as well. But these guys are related to seahorses, so they are not very fast swimmers, so they're fairly slow, but they particularly like to live in the seagrass and the seaweed, just to camouflage and hide away from other predators. But they are actually predators themselves, so they actually have a small mouth at the end of that beak that they can snap shut fairly quickly, sucking their prey in using a vacuum, which will generally be like small little invertebrates in the water, plankton, that sort of thing. And yeah, the males are actually crucial to the raising of the young, much like the seahorse is. But unlike the seahorse, these guys don't really have a pouch, so these guys have the eggs attached to them at the base of the tail, where they will be held and protected until they are ready to hatch, and the male will look after the young over time. But they're very cool, more common in captivity than the much more extravagant leafy sea dragon, but either way I think they are just as beautiful. Another Australian species is the big belly seahorse. So these are the largest seahorses we have off the coast of Australia. I'm still eager to find one when I go snorkeling next time. But they're very, very cool animals, seahorses in general. Like, they're not efficient swimmers, so like that singular fin is all the propulsion they have. But I think the most interesting parts about seahorses are, of course, how they hunt. So they hunt much like the sea dragon, creating a vacuum and sucking in small prey. The males, of course, have a pouch where the female deposits the eggs. The eggs hatch, the young live in there, and the male then releases them when they're ready to emerge. But they also have a prehensile tail, so that tail wraps around seaweed and anything else they can get a grip on to make sure they're not blown away in the current, as that can be fairly easy to do for a seahorse, as has no real way of actually staying in position. But yeah, that's about all I can say. Seahorses are generally one of the iconic fish in the world, and if you were adding aquarium exhibits, you would just have to include it. Another aquarium species is the moon jelly. So these are very common in aquariums, particularly for exhibits where they're in particularly a glass cylinder that has a different kind of light being projected through it. And so it creates a really nice array of colors that you can see reflected off these moon jellies. And so they're more of an ambient species, but certainly one that I'd like to see in that sort of exhibit. But out of all the animals in this video, this is probably the one that can be in like the current exhibit system, just in a different shaped exhibit, because a rectangular, a square box is not exactly the best way to experience these guys. It's much cooler seeing them in the cylindrical habitat. But yeah, these guys are very common in captivity. You'll generally see them in a dark room where they have been lit. And yeah, you couldn't have an aquarium without these guys, as they are just so stunning. And the last animal of the video, and probably my favorite of the marine selection, is the peacock mantis shrimp. So these are stomatopods and are well known for punching above their weight. you could say. So there are various different kinds of mantis shrimp, with the peacock mantis shrimp being one of the being one of the punching species. So they have a club at the end of their foot, of the end of those raptorial arms, that they punch into prey with immense speed, and it creates a bubble that superheats to the surface of the sun. And yeah, you're hit by immense pressure and immense heat all at the same time. And yeah, it's able to crack bulletproof glass. So yeah, you don't want to get hit by one of these, but I really look forward to seeing one day. They can even see in colors that we simply can't, so they're very cool animals. Fairly common in aquaria, as they are very beautiful. They come in a whole range of different colors, with the most notable being a nice teal green color with the red hairs on their little legs there. But yeah, very interesting animals. Would certainly love to see them in the game. So that is all the exhibit animals that I was going to include. I was actually going to include a lot more, but then this video would be over an hour, and it's already 45 minutes because I rambled on about every single animal in this video. But let me know what animals you want to see added to a new exhibit system in Planet Zoo 2, and any suggestions for how the exhibit system could work. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one.